The crisp winter air outside had no business being so sharp, so brutally cold, when inside, the house practically vibrated with a forced, almost suffocating warmth. Christmas morning. Always the same. The scent of pine needles and cinnamon hung heavy, battling the faint, underlying staleness of a house that had seen too many unaddressed grievances accumulate over the years, like dust motes dancing in sunbeams, only visible when illuminated by the harsh light of a breaking dawn. My sister, Sarah, was already up, of course. Her laughter, high-pitched and tinkling like the cheap ornaments on our colossal, over-decorated tree, sliced through the quiet, anticipatory hum of the morning. It was a sound I'd grown to associate with a specific kind of dread, a premonition of my own impending insignificance. Our parents, Eleanor and Richard, sat on the plush velvet sofa, mugs of steaming coffee in hand, their faces radiating an almost beatific glow as they watched their golden child. Sarah, wrapped in a designer silk robe I knew was another of her mother's recent purchases, pranced around, her excitement palpable. She was 23, 2 years my senior, and had perfected the art of perpetual childhood adoration in her parents' eyes. I, at 21, was merely a shadow in the periphery, a permanent fixture in the background of Sarah's vibrant life portrait. "Oh, Mummy, Daddy," she squealed, clutching a small, elegantly wrapped box. "You shouldn't have." But her eyes, wide and sparkling, contradicted her words entirely. She tore into the paper with practiced ease, revealing a diamond pendant that shimmered under the warm glow of the Christmas lights. My mother clapped her hands together, a delighted sigh escaping her lips. "It's perfect, darling. Just like the one you admired in that boutique." My father merely smiled, a broad, indulgent grin that never quite reached his eyes when he looked at me. I sat on the worn armchair across the room, a book open on my lap, though I hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. My hands were clammy, a familiar clamminess that began to settle in my stomach every Christmas morning, a silent protest against the annual ritual of public preference. My gift, a small, unassuming square wrapped in generic silver paper, lay ignored beside me on the floor.
It was always like this.
My presents were an afterthought, delivered with a perfunctory nod, while Sarah's were grand pronouncements, events unto themselves. "Now, Sarah, darling," my mother said, her voice dripping with an extra layer of sweetness, "we have one more very special gift for you." Sarah's breath hitched. Her eyes, already wide, somehow managed to expand further. My parents exchanged a conspiratorial glance, their faces alight with the pure joy of giving something truly magnificent. I felt a familiar, leaden weight settle in my chest. It was coming. The climax of the morning, the grand finale, and it would not involve me. It never did. My father stood, reaching for a set of keys he'd subtly retrieved from his pocket. They glinted in the festive light. "Come on, everyone," he announced, his voice booming with uncharacteristic cheer. "Out to the driveway." My heart sank with a dull thud. A car. Of course. Sarah had been dropping hints for months about needing a more sophisticated ride than the perfectly functional but utterly drab sedan they'd bought her for her 18th birthday. I, meanwhile, drove a 10-year-old compact that had seen better days, its passenger door slightly dented from an unfortunate run-in with a rogue shopping cart that I'd paid for out of my own meager savings. I followed them out, my steps slow and heavy, as if wading through thick mud. The cold air hit me with a jolt, sharp and bracing, momentarily cutting through the dull ache in my chest. And there it was, parked perfectly in the center of our usually empty driveway, shimmering under the pale morning sun like a dark, predatory jewel. A brand new BMW, a sleek, obsidian model that looked like it had driven straight out of a luxury car commercial. A colossal, crimson-red bow, the kind you saw in holiday ads, was tied to its hood, its satiny loops impossibly perfect. Sarah gasped, a genuine, unadulterated sound of pure awe and delight. She clapped her hands to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. You didn't.
You didn't."
My mother wrapped her arm around Sarah, pulling her close. Only the best for our girl, darling. You've worked so hard this year, graduated with honors, gotten that wonderful job, you deserve it. My father beamed, patting Sarah's back. And it's got all the bells and whistles. Top of the line. Your mother picked out the interior. They were a picture of familial bliss, bathed in the glow of the new car, the red bow a fiery symbol of their devotion. Sarah threw her arms around both of them, burying her face in their shoulders, sobbing happy tears. I love you both so much. This is the most incredible gift ever. I stood a few paces back, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my worn hoodie, feeling like an archaeologist observing a relic from a civilization I didn't belong to. The cold didn't register anymore. All I felt was a deeper, more profound chill that settled into my bones. This wasn't just a car. This was a statement. A billboard-sized declaration of where I stood in this family. Outside. Looking in. Always. After what felt like an eternity of oohs and ahs, of Sarah admiring every curve and polished surface of the BMW, of my parents fawning over her reaction, my mother finally seemed to remember my presence. She turned, a faint, almost imperceptible frown creasing her brow, as if recalling an inconvenient appointment. Oh, Elias, she said, her tones suddenly clipped, a stark contrast to the saccharine sweetness she'd used with Sarah. You still haven't opened your gift, dear. Go on, don't be rude. I walked back inside, the joy and warmth of the living room now feeling like a thick, cloying syrup I was trying to swim through. The silver-wrapped square lay mockingly on the floor. I picked it up, feeling its meager weight or lack thereof. It was small, light, utterly devoid of the promise of anything substantial. I meticulously peeled back the paper, careful not to tear it. Inside, nestled in a thin layer of tissue paper, was a folded crisp bill. A $2 bill. My breath hitched. Not a 20. Not a 50. Not even a 5. A $2 bill. A novelty. A joke. My parents had given me $2. For Christmas. The world seemed to tilt. The carefully constructed facade of indifference I'd maintained for years, the carefully banked embers of resentment, suddenly ignited into an inferno. The anger was a physical entity, clawing its way up my throat, choking me. $2. For years of quiet support, of being the easier child, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who tried to excel on their own terms, the one who simply existed. I stared at the green bill, the faded portrait of Thomas Jefferson looking back at me with an ironic smirk. It felt like a punch to the gut, a final, definitive declaration of my worth, or lack thereof, in their eyes. The BMW gleamed outside, a silent, roaring testament to Sarah's worth. My worth was $2. My parents and Sarah finally came back inside, flushed with cold and excitement. Sarah was already scrolling through her phone, no doubt sending pictures of her new ride to her friends. My mother took a sip of her cooled coffee, her eyes scanning the room. They landed on me, then on the $2 bill still clutched in my hand. Oh, good, you opened it, she said, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, perhaps a flicker of embarrassment, quickly suppressed. That's for your coffee fund, dear. We know how much you enjoy those fancy lattes. A coffee fund. $2 for a coffee fund. A single latte if I was lucky, from the cheapest place. My father grunted, preoccupied with untangling a string of lights that had somehow gotten snagged on his sweater. Your sister needed a new car, Elias. You're fine with your old one. It's practical. Practical. That word, always used to describe my life, my choices, my very existence. Practical, meaning dull, uninspired, unworthy of extravagance or even basic consideration. I looked at Sarah, who was now beaming at her reflection in a decorative mirror, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of the quiet devastation unfolding beside her. She had a new car worth tens of thousands of dollars, a symbol of their unconditional love and immense financial investment. I had $2, a symbol of their dismissal. The air in my lungs felt like broken glass. I wanted to scream, to rage, to throw the $2 at their condescending faces. But years of conditioning, years of being the good son, the unproblematic one, held me captive. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper, raspy and barely audible. "Thank you," I said, the words tasting like ash. "It's very thoughtful." My mother nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips.
See?
"He's perfectly happy. You always make such a fuss, Sarah. Elias is just more sensible." Sensible. The dagger twisted. I retreated, excusing myself with the pretense of needing to freshen up. The stairs creaked under my heavy tread, each step echoing the cracking of something inside me. I shut the door to my room, the sanctuary of my neglect, and leaned against it, my chest heaving. The room was small, sparse, distinctly different from Sarah's sprawling, tastefully decorated space. My walls were bare, the furniture functional and old. It was the room of a guest who had overstayed his welcome, not a cherished son. The $2 bill lay flat on my palm, thanks seeming to mock me. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the complete and utter disregard, the casual cruelty, the final, undeniable proof that I was, and always would be, secondary. A footnote. An afterthought. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the culmination of 21 years. Flashbacks, sharp and vivid, began to assault me. Sarah's 5th birthday, a princess party with a pony ride, while I, at 3, watched from the sidelines, clutching a deflated balloon. My 10th birthday, a family dinner at a local pizzeria, while Sarah's 10th had been a lavish affair at an upscale restaurant, complete with a limousine ride. Sarah's academic achievements, celebrated with banners and gifts, while my own, often harder-won successes, were met with a cursory, "That's nice, dear." Sarah's struggles, met with immediate, empathetic intervention. My struggles, met with a shrug and a "you'll figure it out, Elias, you're so independent." Independence. It was a word they used to justify their neglect, a convenient label that absolved them of any parental duty towards me beyond the bare minimum. They had taught me to be independent by forcing me to be. I paid for my own college textbooks, worked part-time jobs through school, bought my own clothes, saved meticulously for anything I wanted. Sarah, meanwhile, had her tuition paid, a generous allowance, and a credit card for emergencies that seemed to cover every whim. The comparison was a poisoned well I had been drinking for my entire life. Today, the well had overflowed, drowning me in the bitter truth. The resentment, so long suppressed, bubbled to the surface, scalding hot.
Why?
Why had I endured it for so long? Why had I continually tried to earn their love, their approval, their attention, only to be met with this crushing indifference? My parents weren't overtly malicious. They didn't hit me, or starve me, or abandon me. Their cruelty was far more insidious, a slow, steady erosion of my self-worth, a constant, subtle message that I was less than, unworthy of the same love, attention, or investment they poured into Sarah.
It
was the cruelty of omission, of casual dismissal, of being consistently overlooked. And the $2 bill, placed strategically against the backdrop of a brand new BMW with a giant red bow, was the starkest, most undeniable evidence of their true feelings. A cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach, replacing the anger and sorrow. This wasn't sustainable. I couldn't live another day under the shadow of their favoritism, shrinking myself to fit into a role they'd assigned me, waiting for scraps of affection that would never come. This was my breaking point, the final straw. The bridge had not just burned, it had been detonated. I looked around my room, the space that had been my only true refuge in this house. What did I need? Not much. My laptop, my external hard drive with all my writing projects, the stories I'd poured my soul into, the ones that often felt like my only real connection to myself. A few changes of clothes, the essentials. My worn backpack, a silent companion through countless lonely nights studying in the library, would suffice. I opened my closet, the faint scent of stale fabric clinging to the air. No fancy clothes, no designer anything. Just practical, durable items. I pulled out a few shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my warmest hoodie. I rolled them tightly, efficiently, pushing down the surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. Each item I packed felt like shedding a layer of expectation, a physical act of severing ties. I took my old, faded journal, its pages filled with years of unvoiced thoughts and observations. My toothbrush, a small bottle of cheap shampoo. My wallet, containing my ID, a debit card with a modest sum, and now, the $2 bill, a bitter souvenir. I rummaged through a drawer, pulling out an old, beat-up flip phone, a relic I kept for emergencies, its battery usually dead. I charged it briefly, just enough to ensure it could connect. This wasn't for calling anyone. This was for cutting them off. The house was quiet now, the revelry downstairs having subsided into a gentle hum of post-celebration contentment. Sarah was probably showing off her new car to her friends on a video call. My parents were likely dozing on the sofa, content in their perfect family bubble. They wouldn't notice my absence until morning, if then. And by then, it would be too late. A profound sadness washed over me, a wave of grief for the family I had always longed for, but never truly had. It wasn't a melodramatic sadness, but a quiet, aching sorrow, like mourning a dream that had finally, irrevocably died. I tried to push it down, focusing on the cold, hard logic of my decision. This was self-preservation. This was survival. I slipped my backpack onto my shoulders. It felt light, yet heavy with the weight of my future. I took one last look around the room. The bare walls, the old desk, the single window looking out onto the dark backyard. There was nothing here for me, nothing truly mine except the memories, both good and overwhelmingly bad. I would not miss this room. I would not miss this house. I would not miss the feeling of constantly trying to prove my worth. Stealthily, I opened my door. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the Christmas tree from downstairs. Each floorboard groaned under my weight, a symphony of creaks that seemed to amplify in the oppressive silence. I held my breath, listening, but heard nothing. Their sleep was deep, untroubled by the quiet exodus of their youngest child. I reached the front door, my hand trembling slightly as I grasped the cold metal doorknob. This was it, the point of no return, the threshold between a life of quiet despair and an uncertain future. I turned the lock, the click echoing in the stillness, and gently, slowly, pulled the door open. The night air outside was frigid, a stark contrast to the artificially warm house. It hit my face like a slap, invigorating and shocking. The sky was a vast, inky canvas studded with countless stars, indifferent to the small, momentous drama unfolding beneath them. I stepped out, pulling the door shut softly behind me, a final click that sealed my fate. I didn't look back. I couldn't. One glance, one moment of hesitation, and I might falter. The BMW gleamed in the moonlight, a silent, menacing sentinel of my past. Its red bow, once a symbol of festive joy, now seemed to mock me, a blood-red stain on the canvas of my escape. I began to walk, my footsteps crunching on the frosty gravel of the driveway, then silently on the pavement of our quiet suburban street. Where was I going? Anywhere.
Away.
The bus station was a few miles away, a long walk in the dead of night, but it was a destination, a tangible step towards a new life. The cold seeped through my thin jacket, chilling me to the bone, but I welcomed it. It was real, honest, unlike the deceptive warmth of the house I'd just left. My breath plumed in front of me, ghost-like. Each step was an act of defiance, a quiet revolution. As I walked, the anger began to subside, replaced by a strange mix of exhilaration and terror. The exhilaration of freedom, of finally making a choice for myself, free from their expectations. The terror of the unknown, of cutting ties completely, of being truly, utterly alone in the world. But even the terror felt cleaner, more honest, than the suffocating disappointment I'd lived with for so long. The streets were deserted, the houses dark, their occupants tucked away in their own warm, uncomplicated lives. I was a solitary figure under the vast, indifferent sky, carrying the entirety of my worldly possessions on my back and a broken heart in my chest. When I finally reached the bus station, the fluorescent lights inside cast a harsh, unwelcoming glow. It was almost 2 a.m. A few other figures huddled on benches, travelers caught between destinations, or those with nowhere else to go. I bought a ticket to the furthest city my $2 bill augmented savings could take me, a city I knew nothing about, a blank slate. I found a quiet corner, pulled out my old flip phone, and with trembling fingers, navigated to my contacts. My parents. Sarah. My finger hovered over Eleanor's name, then Richard's, then Sarah's. It felt like severing an umbilical cord, a painful, necessary amputation. The blocking wasn't just about their inability to call me. It was about my inability to call them. It was a declaration, a final, irrevocable statement. I am no longer part of your narrative. I blocked Eleanor, then Richard, then Sarah. Each tap of the screen was a wrenching twist, a tearing away. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the phone. A single, solitary tear escaped, tracing a cold path down my cheek, a final acknowledgement of the pain, the grief, the years of yearning for something I would never have. Then, a profound quiet descended. Not just the quiet of the bus station, but an internal quiet, a stillness I hadn't felt in years. The noise of their expectations, their judgments, their constant, crushing comparison had been silenced. A vast, empty space opened up inside me, intimidating yet full of potential. The bus arrived, a behemoth of steel and glass, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I boarded, finding a window seat in the back. The engine rumbled to life, a low, comforting growl that vibrated through the floor. As the bus pulled away, carrying me further and further from the life I'd known, I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, watching the familiar streetlights recede into the distance. The journey was long and silent. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat staring out the window, watching the landscape slowly change from suburban sprawl to open highway, then to the indistinct blur of passing towns. My mind replayed the events of the day, dissecting every word, every glance, every gesture. The BMW, the red bow, the $2. Each detail etched into my memory, not as a source of bitterness anymore, but as a stark, undeniable truth. I thought about the future, a vast, terrifying, exhilarating unknown. I had no job, no real plan beyond simply being away. But for the first time in my life, that prospect didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like an invitation to build something new, something that was entirely mine, free from the shadow of Sarah's brilliance and my parents' dismissive love. Over the next few weeks, the initial euphoria of freedom gave way to the harsh realities of self-sufficiency. I landed in a bustling, impersonal city, far from the quiet, suffocating suburbia I'd known. The anonymity was both a blessing and a curse. No one knew my past, my family, my story. I was just another face in the crowd, which was liberating. But the loneliness was a sharp, biting companion. My first few nights were spent in cheap, impersonal hostels, the air thick with the transient stories of strangers. I ate instant noodles and cheap bread, rationing my meager funds. The $2 bill remained in my wallet, a grim reminder, a talisman of my exodus. It fueled a fire within me, a fierce determination not to fail, not to regret my decision. I found a job within a week, working graveyard shifts at a coffee shop in the bustling downtown core. The hours were brutal, the pay barely enough to cover a tiny, cramped room in a shared apartment, but I didn't care. It was a start.
It was my start.
I learned to live frugally, to appreciate the smallest victories. A warm meal I'd cook myself after a long shift. The quiet satisfaction of paying my own rent. The camaraderie of my fellow minimum wage workers, a motley crew of dreamers and strivers, each with their own story of escape or aspiration. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection, a sense of belonging that wasn't predicated on comparison or a parental hierarchy. The initial weeks bled into months. I enrolled in a few online courses, picking up new skills, channeling my intellectual curiosity into fields I genuinely enjoyed, rather than the ones I thought would impress my parents. I discovered a passion for coding, for problem-solving, for the clean logic of building something from scratch. It was a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of my past. The silence from my old life was deafening at first. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was exactly what I had chosen, yet a part of me, the deeply wounded child, still half expected them to come looking, to express even a flicker of concern. But the silence remained unbroken. They hadn't tried to find me. They hadn't reached out through any other channels. My blocking them had merely formalized an emotional distance that had always existed. It reinforced the painful truth. I wasn't just a secondary child. I was, in their minds, expendable. This realization, while initially stinging, eventually brought a strange sense of clarity and peace. There was nothing more to prove, nothing more to hope for. I was truly free. My worth was no longer dictated by their perception, but by my own efforts, my own choices, my own burgeoning sense of self. The coffee shop job eventually led to an entry-level position at a small tech startup, a place buzzing with innovative energy. I worked harder than anyone, fueled by an insatiable hunger to prove myself, not to my parents, but to me. I absorbed everything, learned relentlessly, and slowly, steadily began to climb. Years passed. The cramped room gave way to a small, but comfortable apartment of my own. The initial struggle transformed into a quiet, steady success. I built a network of friends, true friends who saw me, Elias, for who I was, not for who I wasn't in comparison to a sister. They celebrated my triumphs, offered solace in my rare moments of doubt, and encouraged my passions. The memory of that Christmas morning, the BMW, the red bow, the $2, never faded entirely. It became a powerful touchstone, a reminder of the precipice I had stood on and the leap of faith I had taken. It wasn't a source of bitterness anymore, but a foundation. The $2 wasn't a curse, it was a catalyst. It was the cheapest, yet most valuable, gift I had ever received because it had purchased my freedom. One day, browsing an online news feed, I saw a local article about my hometown. There was a photo. My parents, looking older, slightly grayer, standing next to Sarah, who was beaming, holding a trophy of some sort for a local business award. Her new BMW, no longer new, but still impeccably maintained, was parked in the background. My parents looked proud, their smiles wide and genuine, just as they had that Christmas morning. A pang of something, not longing, but a deep, resonant echo of what once was, passed through me. I felt no anger, no jealousy. Only a quiet, detached observation. They were still living their lives, exactly as they always had, centered around Sarah. And I was living mine, centered around myself. The chasm between us was vast, unbridgeable, but it no longer felt like a chasm of pain. It felt like a space I had intentionally created, a necessary distance for my own growth. I closed the browser, the image fading from my screen. My own life was rich now, filled with purpose, with genuine connection, with a deep-seated confidence that I had forged on my own terms. I had built a career I loved, cultivated meaningful relationships, and discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. The silence from my former family continued. It was a comfortable silence now, a testament to my resilience, a monument to my escape. I had blocked them not out of childish pique, but out of a profound need to protect my own emerging self. And in doing so, I had not lost a family. I had found myself. The sun streamed through my apartment window, illuminating a stack of books, a comfortable armchair, and a small, vibrant plant thriving on the sill. My space, my rules, my life. It wasn't a BMW with a red bow, but it was far more valuable. It was freedom, peace, and the undeniable knowing that I was enough, exactly as I was, without anyone else's validation. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.